open your hearts, open your spirits to what you're going to hear today. Grab on to at least one idea, because if we don't start spreading the ideas, who's going to?
So it was about 8 years ago when I hit bottom. I was really just looking for hope, searching for it. I was desperate for it, truly. And I found it in the strangest place. Facebook. So I was scrolling through Facebook one night, and this guy popped on. His name was like Tony Robbins or something. And he's working with this guy who was also suffering in his relationship. And after just a few minutes of working with Tony, he was like cured or something. It was amazing. And now I know it was an ad, so it probably took longer than that, but it gave me hope. And that sent me on a journey to figure out the strategy now. How can I actually create a great relationship? And in that journey, I've had the opportunity to go to a bunch of seminars, read a bunch of books, and even work with people eventually. And along the way, I found out that I wasn't alone. There's so many people that are suffering in relationship, and we can see it in the data. When we dig into the data, we can find that one of the leading causes of depression, of suicide, is actually relationship issues. And then we look at divorce data, we find out that roughly half of all marriages end in divorce. I guess that means the other half ends in death, which is not a great outlook either. It's no wonder why marriage rates are plummeting and we stop having children. It's because we start saying things like, relationships are hard. Has anyone ever said that? Relationships are hard? Or maybe love is painful? Well, I'm here to propose that it doesn't have to be that way. And that data, that's the reason that I'm here today, and the reason you're listening to an engineer talk about love. Which might seem like a little bit of a strange mix, at least it does to me. Because we aren't exactly known for our emotional depth and social skills. But here I am, I'm going to break a few, I forgot my words here. All right, we're going to break through that. So I'm going to propose to you there's another way. I'm going to propose that maybe relationships can be very easy. Maybe they can be almost effortless. And that maybe relationships are just a skill that we need to learn. And if we can learn a skill, then maybe we can teach it to somebody else. Maybe you can teach it to your children. And maybe they can teach it to their children. And what if that led to ending this generational trauma? And maybe we could have a better world. And maybe it just starts with one relationship. And now that I've said that, you might even be thinking about somebody that you want to be closer with. And you might even keep them in your heart throughout this talk, and perhaps that'll lead you to a solution. And so going back to my journey, it started with a couple of questions. And they weren't very helpful questions, so please don't write these down. But they were, why am I not loved? And how do I find love? Which is a little bit strange since I was married. But the questions kept me disconnected, even in tender moments. There was this one moment where I was laying with my infant daughter. We're skin to skin. She was on my chest. And I was so disconnected because I was thinking about what I did not have. And it got so lonely and painful that I decided to take a job that I didn't like, working for someone I really didn't like. But it was my way to escape. It was a way to avoid and get away from it because it was so painful to be at home. And it didn't start with hiding and avoiding. It started with bottling up what I was feeling. And bottling it up until it built up and then exploded. And I talked to her and said to my wife, it's all your fault. If you would just change, I could be happy. For some reason, that didn't work. So I tried something new because I created a belief. I created a belief that communication doesn't work. So I just stopped talking. Doesn't work either. But I had this list of stuff we couldn't talk about. And I started piling them up and stacking them like they were bricks building a wall. Couldn't talk about the loss of passion. I can't talk about how we're raising the kids. Can't talk about who's taking the kids to the soccer game. Have you noticed that they're like smaller and smaller topics? Because when we skip one topic and don't talk about it, it becomes easier to not talk about the next one. And so soon I had this wall that was so tall that we didn't connect at all. And that's how my first marriage ended, in silence. I thought problem solved, because she was the problem. So I'm perfect, obviously. And so I got into a new relationship pretty quick, and the same patterns played out. I would share something, and it wasn't received the way I wanted it to be received. And so I remembered, that's right, communication doesn't work, so just stop talking. It works a lot better. And then there was this one night where we were in this meltdown. I don't remember what it was about. It was something silly, I'm sure. But I knew that I had to do something. So I decided to take a bath. It was a great way to escape. So I turned on the hot water and popped into the bath. It was like my place to hide. And you probably know this, I didn't at the time, but being naked in a bathtub is not a great place to hide. You're pretty exposed. But there I was, laying there, and then I saw the door open. And my fiance at the time, Annie, who's here, by the way, she's going to be speaking shortly, she came in and she looked at me. And she said, "John, I think we need to break up." And here's this woman who's so full of love. It can't be her, I thought in the moment. And I realized the first lesson. I created the problem. It's okay, great. So I created the problem. Now I can get a solution. I've got a small problem, though. Got another problem, I guess. And I'm not an expert in this. I've gone to all these seminars, read all these books. Clearly, I don't know how to apply this stuff. So, what do I do here? And I started thinking about, they've got this problem, a solution. Oh, wait, I'm an engineer. This is actually really good news because I solve problems for a living. People pay me for this. So I got to work, and when I did, I started paying attention to just little things. And I started testing things out like it was an experiment. And I started paying attention to what worked and what didn't work. And then I went and got feedback. So I went and talked to friends and family, like how are they experiencing me? I even went and talked to my ex-wife. And she gave me 3 hours of feedback. But it was pretty uncomfortable. It wasn't just because it was outside in Vegas in the summer. It was a little bit stressful. But in that feedback, what I learned is that I was fantastic at building walls. And I was expecting other people to take down my wall. And that was the moment that I realized that that's absurd. It's my wall. And if it's my wall, only I can take it down. And maybe that means that lesson 2 is true, which is I'm also the solution. Okay, so now I know that I created the problem, I'm the solution. I still don't really know how to solve the problem, but I know I'm the solution. So I got to work and went back to engineering because, well, I'm not a demolition expert, so that's not going to do any good. So I got back to work and figured out that I needed to pay attention to other people. I need to see how they're reacting and responding to how I'm showing up in the conversation. And I noticed that if I showed up as angry, they might show up as angry or scared. Annie tended to go to scared, and that created sadness. Or if I showed up as happy, they showed up as happy. This is actually pretty cool. They're mirroring how I'm showing up. And so maybe what that means is that I just need to change how I'm being. If I really want to have love, I just need to change who I'm being. And so that brought me to lesson number 3. Be love, have love. And I thought this is really bizarre because I have an achiever mindset, and so I thought, well, no, it's supposed to be like if I just do more, I'll have more. And in thinking about doing, I was pursuing these tips, tricks, and hacks. And I was watching all the YouTube videos and Instagram videos and thinking, oh, there's the solutions out there. But I now know that wasn't going to work. And I was thinking, as I was watching these different videos, I came across one from David Goggins, and you might know who he is. And he said, he was talking about actually Ironman racing. And he said, there ain't no hack, bro. And I realized, wait, that might be true for relationships. So I just started being love, and love started appearing more and more, and I found out, well, this is way easier. So that's what I do now. And this is the point of the conversation when usually someone in the audience says, it can't be that easy. And so, well, yes and no. So here's what we're doing. We're building up a foundation. And the foundation is these first 3 lessons, because if we don't recognize that I created the problem and that I'm the solution, and that the solution is to be love so I can have love, then no framework works. Because we might be showing up in anger, and so we'd be pushing this person away. And so with that, I'm going to share with you a framework as long as you promise that you'll come into the conversation being love. Is everyone up for that? Yes, be love? Yes, excellent. Okay. You want a framework? Yes, all right. So here's the framework and what it's going to sound like, and I might have a volunteer, we'll see. She might be sitting in the front row, in the middle. And what it sounds like is, hey, baby, the other day I called you and I left you a message, and I didn't get a call back. And I was feeling pretty sad because I made up a story that maybe you were mad at me and maybe you didn't love me. And I know that's not true because I know how much you love me. And what I really want is for you just to text me if you can't call me back. Would that work for you? All right, give it up for Annie. Thank you. So here's what we're doing is we're just using a simple structure that follows our brain patterns. We've had a lot of talk about brains today. And the pattern is that we experience something, and it goes up to our emotional center and our memories, and we create a story, and then we communicate the story to the logic part of our brain, and then our mouth spits out the story as if it's true, and it's complete fact. So we're just kind of shortcutting that a little bit, and we're saying, hey, brain, actually, no, that's not true. So here's the structure, if you want to write this down. It's first, fact. Report the fact exactly as it happened, like a camera's watching it. And then second, it's the feeling, it's the emotion. And so that us men understand, I advise you to consider using just a few emotions like sad, mad, scared. We can understand those. Next is story. The story I made up is. Next is logic. And this, to me, this was the breakthrough for us. With all the things we've studied, we didn't hear that bring in the logic. And it's, and I know that's not true because. And that's what lets this prefrontal cortex know that the story's not true. And then we can communicate our request, our want. And I use want, not need, because need can create an obligation. Want? Well, that gives someone a chance to give me a gift, and that's pretty cool. So you might be asking, like, how do you know this works? Well, we've had the chance to work with quite a few people. We've done it a few thousand times for ourselves. But the best example I can give you, especially about being love, is my ex-wife. So when we got divorced, she blamed Annie for the end of our marriage. And she swore she would never be in the same room as her. And it was slightly inconvenient because I had visions, like we'd have a blended family, we would travel together and go to Disneyland. So we kind of needed to be in the same room. And then there was this one day where Stephanie made a big decision. She decided to go to this emotional intelligence course that Annie and I had also graduated from. And I decided to go to her graduation. And I remember standing there as her eyes were closed. I was right in front of her when she opened her eyes. And she looked at me and she apologized for how she showed up during our 20-year marriage. And then something magical happened. She looked at my 7-year-old daughter, Mia, and asked her to introduce her to Annie. And she walked across the room, hand in hand, so brave. She was a little bit nervous. I could see she was shaking. And Annie was on the other side of the room. She saw what happened. So she has this big Annie smile you'll get to see shortly. And they hugged. The first time they met. That's the power of love. It's possible for anybody. And today, we do have a blended family. So I'm going to leave you with some final thoughts. Walls are built everywhere in our lives. They're built between parents and kids, neighbors, friends, coworkers, communities, even nations. And they get built because we start assuming negative intent, we leap to judgment, and we stop talking. And that's when the wall goes up. And that's when relationships die. And it doesn't have to be that way. Because not only can conversation heal a relationship, the conversation is the relationship. So today, perhaps right after I finish during our break, you might make a new decision. You might decide to call that person you've been thinking about. You might decide to reconnect, to be love. And then you too can have the love you've always wanted. Thank you.